Hello, everybody. This is Lord Phantom here. Welcome back to every episode of the original Powerpuff Girls Reviewed Season 2. And last time we did Season 1 and the pilots and the shorts, so let's get moving. And before we get moving to this video, I would like for you to subscribe and comment on this channel. Thank you. Episode 14A, Stuck, Up, and Away. The air date is June 25th of 1999, and the production code is 201. The plot of this episode is that a new student, Princess Moorbucks, arrives at Oaks kindergarten and begs to be a Powerpuff Girl after the class pet Twiggy is saved. So the fun fact of this episode is that Princess Moorbucks has her first appearance here. And well, Princess is a little problem, which I'll get into later. Princess is unaware of the Powerpuff Girls because she's the new kid. And she could also take no for an she can't take no for an answer basically. And later in the episode there's a reference to batarangs and a utility belt when the Powerpuff Girls are saving people from a robbery. Yeah, that is not a good sign. Well, actually, it is a good sign. There's a Dragon Ball Z reference in this episode at the end when Princess has her big boss fight with the Powerpuff Girls. Yeah, this episode, I'm just gonna say it right now. It's not really that good because I'll explain. Okay, this episode sucks. I'm sorry, but it sucks. The first episode of a season should not be like that, but it personally sucks in my opinion. Princess Moorbucks is a spoiled brat, and she just does not want to listen to people. She just not want to listen. She turns into a villain right after this episode because she wants to be a Powerpuff Girl. Bad news, you're never gonna get it. You're never gonna be a Powerpuff Girl. Never, ever, ever. But in the later episode, she does get powers temporarily. And that is horrifying. A horrifying concept. Also, I do not like Moorbucks, in my opinion. Moorbucks just sucks. Her origin story just does not fucking work for me. Not the origin. She wants to be a Powerpuff Girl. Dude, you're never going to be a Powerpuff Girl. Even if you tried your best, you would never be a Powerpuff Girl. You would just be a liability at that point. And also, I just do not like her, period. That's why this episode sucks. The only thing that's redeeming it is the actual fight where Princess Moorbucks gets beat up. Thank God. So yeah, we're going to move on to the next episode, which is going to be slightly better. Episode 14B, Schoolhouse Rocked. The air date is June 25th of 1999, and the production code is 201. The plot of this episode is a truant officer named Jack Wednesday enlists the Green Gang at Pokeo's kindergarten, and Mrs. Keene forbids the girls to fight them at school. Fun fact, the Green Gang never attended school. Yeah, so that is the fun fact. And Ace knows how to manipulate very well, including having Mrs. Keene believe that they're good people, despite, you know, them committing crimes over and over again. And they always cause trouble anyway. And Mrs. Keene is blind to reality in this episode, even though it's a cartoon. For God's sake, it's a cartoon. But after a game of dodgeball, Mrs. Keene sees the light, and instead of punishing the girls, she says, okay, have them play at their own game. And also, Jack Wednesday is an asshole. So what do I think about this episode? Is this a great time for Powerpuff Girls, or this is a bad time for the Powerpuff Girls? Well, in this case, I would say both, because this is a mediocre episode for me, and I'll explain why. Even though there's some good points and bad points in this episode, like the episodes before it, except for the first episode, Stuck Up and Away, some of these episode concepts work pretty well, including the teacher not believing them at first because she's giving them a second chance, basically, even though they don't really deserve it. And Mrs. Keene sees the error of her ways in this episode. And the Powerpuff Girls do constantly warn Mrs. Keene about everything, and don't worry, we'll see more of this arrogance later in the season. And besides that, Mrs. Keene sort of had to do a neutral thing. She couldn't favor either the Green Gang or the Powerpuff Girls because she'd be taking a side. But in this situation, she was wrong, and she needs to accept that. And also, Jack Wednesday is an asshole for putting teenagers in a kindergarten because they're supposed to be in high school, I think. Actual high school, but I think he put them there just to keep Green Gang, the gang there, to keep them in check, basically. But he is an asshole. Yeah, I just do not like him. I do not like him. I know what a truant officer is. They basically try to catch kids who are supposed to be in school. So yeah, he was doing his job, but not very well. So yeah, that's it for Schoolhouse Rocked. And we're gonna move on to the next episode. Episode 15A, Collector. The air date is August 6th, 1999. And the production code is 202. The plot of this episode is that comic book geek and Powerpuff Girls fanatic Lee Baxter goes crazy after completing a collection. So he starts stealing the Powerpuff Girls' possessions. Okay, I'm not gonna say the rest of that for this entry. I'm not gonna say the rest of this voice impersonation. Oh, this episode. Oh, I remember this episode pretty well. So the fun fact is that Lenny Baxter is voiced by Tom Kenny, the voice of SpongeBob and other people. Yeah, and Lenny goes insane over the course of the episode because of his obsession with the Powerpuff Girls. And the first scene with him is very powerful because he's also shown to be a little old man child that can't get past his obsession with the Powerpuff Girls at all. And Townsville does come to the girls' rescue because, one, they care about him very much, and also the professor cares. It is amazing how he actually reacts in this episode because he goes to the mayor rounds the townspeople up and says, "Hey, we gotta get this guy. Get him!" And then the professor's speech when Lenny Baxter is defeated is so satisfying. But I do have one question though. How did Lenny sneak into their house anyway? Did he. Was the door unlocked or something? Or did he attach a rope of some kind? Or did he just appear in their house without them noticing? That's a very mysterious question that I hope that I'll get answers to. So what do I think about this episode? Is it worthy to be saved or to be in Lenny Baxter's collection? Well, it's worthy to be saved. It is a Chemical X episode. Everything from the powerful scene in the beginning to the ending speech of the professor. And yeah, when he does go to jail for it. And that one question that I had in the previous slide was it is a good question. So if anybody wants to comment below in the comment section and tell me how the hell did he get into his house, how the hell did the Powerpuff how the hell did Lenny get into his get into the Powerpuff Girls house? Blah. Sorry about that. Please put it in the comments section below and put your theories in the comment section. So yeah, chemical episode. So now let's move on to episode 15B. Episode 15B, Supper Villain. The air date is August 6th of 1999, and the production code is 202. The plot of this episode is the Powerpuff Girls are invited to dinner by their next door neighbors, the Smiths, but the results are shocking. Fun fact, the Smiths are the Powerpuff Girls' original neighbors before a new neighbor comes along in season 5. Yeah. In the episode, we see Harold Smith's routine twisting honey jars, I believe, or mustard jars on an assembly line. Harold Smith is inspired by Mojo to become evil after seeing him on national television, and where the Powerpuff Girls were defeated by Mojo for a time until he was defeated and captured along with the mayor, of course. And when the Powerpuff Girls and Professor Utonium go over to their house, Harold has a pep talk in the bathroom where he tries to cheer himself up, but immediately gets thrown off by a comment. So he starts working on this villain costume that he was working on throughout the episode, and it looks pretty bad, like very, very bad. It's just it is basically homemade. So yeah, and he holds the professor hostage during their supper, during the dinner party, and then they get into a fight. He gets taken away by the authorities, and then yeah, the wife of Harold Smith gets very, very mad after the Professor Utonium and the girls leave. Says, "Oh, they ruined my dinner." No, they didn't ruin your dinner. Your husband did. Yeah, there's a sequel to this episode, which I'll get into further down the line. So, yeah, this is a pretty good episode, I believe. Yeah, this is a pretty good episode. Everything from the beginning to the end, just like 15A. And yeah, this is the last we see of the Smiths for a while. Until either the middle of season 2 or the end of season 2, I believe. So yeah, and there's a sequel to this episode, which I forgot the name of, but I will remember in time what sequel, the episode sequel's name is. So yeah, and this is a pretty good episode for a pretty good season. Ooh, I sense a great birthday episode. Episode 16A, Birthday Bash. The air date is August 20th of 1999. The production code is 203. Well, while in prison, the Powerpuff Girls' enemies come up with their own plans to destroy the girls during their birthday party. Fun fact, him can mind control the Powerpuff Girls. So, yeah, in this episode, him could also control the Powerpuff Girls with their minds, apparently. And 4 of the Powerpuff Girls villains appear at the same time in one scene of the episode. Each villain's present is pretty unique. Like Mojo has a robot, Princess has a missile, the, the Amoeba Boys have voodoo dolls, and him has a evil pianta, a bull pianta. So yeah, that is pretty cool, I think. Rainbow the Clown also returns, in this episode, so Powerpuff Girl fans that theorized that him was actually Rainbow the Clown, you're wrong. And the mayor is actually pretty hilarious in this episode because he gets it on his face. I think, no, that's the professor that gets the target on his face, and the mayor says, I got it, and then Bubbles just flies it away. So, yeah, it's a good episode, but for some reason it's mediocre to me. I don't know. It's just a mediocre episode to me. It's just there's exciting elements in it. Maybe it's because of Princess. I don't know. I think it is because of Princess. Any appearance of Princess ruins an episode for me. I do not know why. It just does, and I know there's plenty more Princess episodes in this series, but I'm just gonna have to deal with it and suck it up. So yeah, this is a mediocre episode because of Princess in it, I believe, and she is a spoiled brat. So yeah, I thought her dad was. I'll just keep that in another episode. So yeah, this is a mediocre episode, and yeah, this is just a mediocre episode because Princess, and I think it could have been better if there was only him, Mojo, and the Amoeba Boys in it, because three of them are already comical. Episode 16B, Two Pooped, The Puff. The air date is August 20th of 1999, and the production code is 203. The plot of this episode is that they're fed up with the citizens taking them for granted. The girls go on strike until Townsville could do things themselves. The fun fact in this episode is that Townsville can't fend for themselves in this episode. The Powerpuff Girls become overworked. Townsville uses them for everything, and they finally snap accordingly. And I feel sympathetic for them because I do too much things in my time anyway. And also, Townsville needs to really grow up. They went from functioning like an independent city to an actual dependency on them. It's bad in this episode. It's one of the episodes that tells me that Townsville really needs to stop being assholes to people. Because, oh, you need to do itself. Dude, apparently the education system there sucks. Apparently the education system sucks there. I just do not know why, but it sucks. So what do I think about this episode? Well, it's another Antidote X episode. So yeah, they went from helping the Powerpuff Girls get free from Lenny Baxter to this. I am very, very disappointed in them. They they clearly just do not care about the Powerpuff Girls in this episode. So screw them in this episode. My God. And also they are just you can't even do things yourselves? That's a bad sign. Because if I move there, I'd probably lose my mind and move back to where I came from. Yeah, I would just move back because nobody would like Townsville at that point. So yeah, and also when I'm gonna, I'm not gonna tell you what happened when Gotham, you know, and Harley Quinn became independent because the United States couldn't deal with them in that universe anymore. I feel that's what would happen in the live action reboot at one point. He said, you know what? You're no longer part of us. You know what? I would totally agree with that notion. So yeah, this is an Antidote X episode, and let's move on to the next episode, shall we? Episode 17A, Dream Scheme. The air date is September 24th of 1999, and the production code is 205. The plot of this episode is that the Powerpuff Girls refuse to go to sleep, and they run into trouble with the Sandman. Fun fact, there is rhyming in this episode. The villain of this episode is called the Sandman, and he wants to get some sleep, which is understandable because I have a condition. A condition they. Well, I have a condition where I can't fucking sleep at all. Well, not sleep at all. I can't get to sleep. So I know where he's coming from. The narrator tells his scheme in the Sandman scheme in the name of rhyming. So yeah, the Powerpuff Girls eventually scared the Sandman because they didn't want to go to sleep to begin with, but then at the end of the episode they want to go to sleep. So yeah, and the nightmares are also creative because they are very creative for this episode. Very great nightmare fuel. So yeah, it's great nightmare fuel for the kids. And the professor is reasonable, unlike the last episode, because he wants to get to sleep too. So I know his pain. So yeah. So what do I think of this episode? Is it a dream of dreams or is it a nightmare of nightmares? It is a dream of dreams because it's a Chemical X episode. So yeah, it's a Chemical X episode because the villain is relatable. The Powerpuff Girls is just not wanting to go to sleep like average children do. But then that, but then the Sandman just puts them asleep anyway. And the Sandman just wants to get some sleep. But at the end of the episode, he no longer wants to get some sleep because he's scared about the Powerpuff Girls invading his nightmares. Oh, and also the Powerpuff Girls have probably have the ability to connect to each other's dreams, which is a good thing and a bad thing for us villains. So yeah, it's a bad thing for us villains because the heroes can connect through their dreams, which is fucking terrifying. So yeah, let's move on to episode 17B. Episode 17B, You Snooze, You Lose. The air date is September 24th, 1999, and the production code is 205. The plot of this episode is that Mojo Jojo's plans fall into the hands of the Amoeba Boys, the least competent of Townsville's villains. Fun fact, the Powerpuff Girls misunderstand the blueprints because they think it's a scavenger hunt, which is the girls are smarter than this, but not so smart that it's insulting. They're not Jimmy Neutron type intelligent. They're just kids. So they're smart. I'll give them that. Mojo has a breakdown after he realizes that his plan is missing. Yeah, Mojo blueprint goes out a window, which I think he should have actually closed the window blinds to prevent from that plan getting into the wrong hands. So yeah, and as the Powerpuff Girls put together the scavenger hunt machine thing, it's not really that obvious what it is at first, but then it turns out to be a laser machine, and then Mojo says, "Hey, let me attach chewing gum to the whole thing." Yeah, that will turn out well. I think it would have been better if they just put glue there. Yeah, but glue there, but then again, we wouldn't have the Powerpuff Girls after this episode. So, and the Powerpuff Girls also regret helping the Amoeba Boys at the end of the episode. And Mojo takes responsibility, of course, because it's his machine after all. It's his machine. So yeah, so what do I think about this episode? So this is a Chemical X episode yet again, because, well, it's a good episode. It's a very good episode. The Amoeba Boys actually are handed a plan via wind currents, so they screw it up, of course, and think, "Oh, it's a ride, whee!" But it's not a ride, it's a death machine. So yeah, this is a pretty good episode for season 2. One of the good episodes of season 2. And we will move on to episode 18A. Episode 18A, Beat Your Greens. The air date is September 10th of 1999, and the production code is 204. The plot of this episode is that the superheroines at first refuse to eat vegetables, but when broccoli aliens invade Townsville, it is up to the children of Townsville to eat the invaders. Fun fact, this is the first appearance of aliens in Powerpuff Girls. The the coding is a little bit messed up because on the 10th anniversary DVD collection, Beat Your Greens is 18A and the previous episode was 17B. So that's this is supposed what it's supposed to be, I believe. And this is a PSA to eat your vegetables. Yay! But at least they make it fun. They have broccoli aliens invade Townsville using mind control spores, which is interesting to see. It's interesting for the time. There's a Star Wars Episode 4 reference when the dad is trying to get his child to eat his vegetables. And the kids of Townsville have to eat the aliens eventually. So, basically, in the episode itself, all the adults of Townsville eat their vegetables and they turn into not really zombies, just in a vegetative state, I believe. And also Buttercup does a pretty good job of owning one of the kids after after one of the kids says it's gotta be a trick. And then that ownage is so good. It is so good. The kids work together, they beat the aliens, and the Broccoli Emperor dies like all of his minions, gets eaten to death. So, what do I think of this episode? Is it a, a power packed episode or a rotten broccoli episode? It's a power packed episode, which means it's a Chemical X episode. The episode works pretty well at first, including the broccoli invasion, the broccoli alien invasion. Spores are pretty nice, and the kids of Townsville do eat their vegetables, like salt and pepper. Put cheese on the broccoloids. It is so good that I might try to eat an actual vegetable besides a potato for once. So yeah, this is a great episode and a great send off. Not a great send off. A great send off to the next episode, which is episode 18B, Down and Dirty. The air date is September 10th of 1999 and the production code is 204. The plot of this episode is that Buttercup refuses to take a bath after fighting the monster, so she's forced to take one. Fun fact, Buttercup underestimates the power of hygiene in this episode. So yeah, this is pretty much a Buttercup episode because she does not want to take a bath because she thinks it's useless to take a bath over and over and over again when she's going to get dirty again. And this is a PSA for hygiene basically. So yeah, it's basically a hygiene episode. Everyone in Townsville gets very mad, very pissed off, very fast, which is excusable to a certain extent. But kicking her out of town is kind of overdoing it for me. It's kind of overdoing it. Oh yeah, Buttercup gets kicked out of the house. Yeah, not a good idea, Utonium. I don't know what you were going to do. Force her to take a bath. Forcibly take her bath. Yeah, I think kicking her out of the house is a very bad idea. It makes you seem more and more of an asshole if you keep doing that. So, and Townsville does have its reasons for Buttercup for hunting down Buttercup. That is us being fucking assholey. I'm not surprised if they had to apologize to Buttercup themselves in this episode, but it's basically a Buttercup torture porn. Plain and simple, but it's not really a torture porn. It's a PSA for hygiene, and I think it's a mediocre episode. This is a mediocre episode because, well, of the Buttercup torture. Well, Buttercup did bring it up on herself, basically, but it isn't really her fault. Who's gonna want who? What? Okay, what kind of kid is gonna not want to take a bath? Okay, Utonium should have tried something else, not kick her out of the house. It's fucking stupid. Why the hell would you do that? I understand she has superpowers, but God, did Utonium have a similar dilemma when he was younger? And he was kicked out until he forced himself. I do not want to think about that scenario. I'm probably thinking too much deeper into things. And the only reason it ain't an Antidote X episode is because, well, Buttercup did bring it up on herself, and it ain't her fault most of the time. I think that Townsville and Professor Utonium should have tried a different approach. Episode 19A, Slave of the Day. The air date is October 8th of 1999 and the production code is 206. The plot of this episode is, after being saved from a train by the Powerpuffs, Big Billy pledges his loyalty to the girls despite him getting in their way. Fun fact, Big Billy is more harmful being a hero than a villain. So yeah, he is, Big Billy basically joins the, the light side of the force, I guess. And Big Billy is dumb, and Big Billy swears to protect the Powerpuff Girls. He's more harmful to the girls as a hero than a villain. And the Gang Green Gang does not care about Big Billy at all. They just want to use him, I guess. Ace or Grubber's plan is genius because, well, who would you expect to be there? Big Billy? No, probably not. Blossom gets angry at him, rightfully so. And well, Big Billy has this villain to hero to villain arc throughout the episode. It is like an anime arc, but actually more complex. Well, not more complex. It it is hilarious how he handles living with the girls, and yeah, this is a very, very, very good episode, and it gives us a, a soft side to Big Billy, and besides it being casual oaf. So, so what do I think about this episode? This is a Chemical X episode because of the Big Billy's villain, the hero, the villain arc, and it's very interesting how throughout the series they reference anime from Dragon Ball Z to of anime arc really, but they do it in less than an episode. So it is very 90s and very cool, I guess. And also, I don't think Big Billy turns good ever again after this episode, so this is the only time we see him being very a good person. So yeah, let's move on to episode 19B. Episode 19B, Los Dos Mojos or the Two Mojos. The air date is October 8th of 1999. The production code is 206. The plot of this episode is that Bubbles thinks she's Mojo after being hit by a construction beam. It is up to the girls to get her back to normal. The fun fact here is that there seems to be a construction theme throughout the episode. See that Townsville is under construction. There's there's construction everywhere. Repair from the last attack or something. Last major attack on Townsville. And Bubbles does get amnesia in this episode, and Mojo gets kicked out of his lair, and now Bubbles, the joy and the laughter of the Powerpuff Girls, thinks that she's Mojo. Yeah, it is very confusing. Bubbles does a very perfect impression of Mojo. She, Mojo basically repeats everything twice, and it is hilarious. And Mojo is semi-naked in this episode, which is interesting. Very interesting and weird. And also there's sister rivalry in this episode because Bubbles punched Blossom at some point in the episode, even though at one point, even at the end of the episode, Bubbles goes back to normal. This episode will be one of the best. It's one of the best episodes I have ever seen in my life, and it is pretty good. This is one of the better episodes of season 2. And it's very, very good, and it has a very good original plot with an amnesiac Bubbles. SpongeBob would kind of do this like in 2009, like 10 years after the Powerpuff Girls has been canceled or on a hiatus. But that episode of SpongeBob fucking sucked in 2009, so yeah, it sucked. But this one is actually pretty good. The villain, well, not the villain. Well, there's this is what would happen. This episode explains what would happen if there were two Mojos and two Mojos, one Townsville, not good. Does not equal good in this episode. Does not equal good. I'm I wish that they would just bring this back in the reboot and expand upon it, like the new reboot, like the new animated reboot that's coming out. So yeah, and this is a pretty good episode. I would recommend watching it. Episode 28, a very special Blossom. The air date is November 26th of 1999, and the production code is 207. In this episode, when the professor craves a golf bag for Father's Day, Blossom resorts to theft, resulting in father and daughter getting in trouble. The fun fact of this episode is that Professor Utonium pretends to love liver and onions. The girls in this episode try to fundraise $2,000 for these golf club bags, with the golf club bag. Anyway, this is also the first episode where Blossom gets arrested and her first solo arrest slash crime, and the mayor seems to have a mysterious past in this episode by saying that his days are over. And also in this episode, the Professor Utonium does not even question Blossom where she got the golf club bag from, and Utonium is a dick in this certain episode. Utonium is a dick in this episode, what to say that, and he is a dick in this episode because he doesn't even question Blossom, yada yada yada. So this is an Antidote X episode. Yeah, this is another bad episode because Blossom is out of character in this episode for stealing a $2,000 golf club bag. I would understand if Mojo sold it to her or something, but no. In this episode, she steals it. She's not the perfect little girl that everybody and Townsville thinks she is. And that's why I have a problem with certain heroes being supposedly perfect. Because everybody makes a mistake, right? Everybody makes a mistake. Even villains like I do. So yeah, this is not a good episode, and hopefully the next episode will be better, which it may not be. Episode 20B, Daylight Savings. Air date is November 26th of 1999, and the production code is 207. The plot of this episode is when the girls get exhausted at school, Mrs. King declares a curfew and the professor must enforce it to get the girls back on track. Fun fact, Professor Utonium actually feels bad about making the girls go to bed early. Okay, I'm going to be the devil's advocate here for this episode. Mrs. King does have her reasons. I'm sorry, but she has her reasons. She may seem like a total idiot for doing it in this episode, but they gotta go to sleep sometime. Remember Dream Scheme? Yeah, that's what happens when they're too. That's the consequences of being up too late. Believe me, I've been through the same thing before. And the, so so the so the superheroines get the, got to save the city at the end of the episode, but they might still have a curfew still set in place. And then this is another episode for sleep. And I wouldn't be surprised if Townsville and the mayor got pissed off at Mrs. King, which is not a good idea to get her pissed off. Because if you get pissed off at something, that curfew should have been in place a long time ago. I'm sorry, it should have been placed a long, long time ago. And also, even if that curfew was in place and you told him removed it, he would regret it instantly. So yeah. So what do I think about this episode? Well, this is a mediocre episode for me because, well, it's a mediocre episode for me because, well, Mrs. T may seem like a total asshole in this episode, but in reality, she's not. Yes, superheroes gotta save the city, but they also have to have a curfew, which the villains can abuse to their benefit, which I would really love to do in Townsville if I ever went there. If I, well, I will go there eventually. Really. Wait a minute. I think I already went there. If I'm not mistaken. Very well. Well, Mrs. King, you did the right thing by putting a curfew on them, but you want to intentionally set off a series of events that would bite you. And Professor Utonium should have been the one to put it in place in the first place. He should have put that curfew on in the first place. But it's a cartoon. I'll give him that. So yeah, this is a mediocre episode. Not only because of those things, the episode just feels really, really off to me. It just does. And also, I hate daylight savings time. It's useless. Okay, it is pretty much useless nowadays. Useless. Episode 21A, Mo Job. The air date is February 13th of 2000 and the production code is 208. The plot of this episode is that Princess Morbucks bribes Mojo Jojo to come up with a plan to destroy the Powerpuff Girls. Fun fact, Mojo Jojo could create Chemical X and Antidote X. So yeah, that's the main point of this episode. So I would usually encourage him to make that stuff, except if he's taking the original Chemical X, you know, it's just that way. You know, Chemical X, Antidote X. I think that him making those chemicals are not as potent, So he has to steal the original source every time he wants to. So yeah, and this is the first time that Princess and Mojo were together. Now look, not even as a master of all evils, I do not like Princess Morbucks either. Even Mojo hates Princess except with the money situation. And even I just do not like Princess Morbucks, to be honest. She is not a villain to me. She's a spoiled brat that just has a lot of money. And I would not accept any kind of bribe from Princess Morbucks anyway. Because I don't like her. Period. End of story. I just do not like her. Even Mojo hates her, which I said before. Also, I can make pretty much the same elements that the girls do. I can make fire, thunder, and lightning. So Buttercup makes fire, she make Buttercup makes fire, Bubbles makes thunder, and Blossom lightning, which I actually have mastered those elements before, but well, not here anyway, not in my dimension. And there is slow-mo in the second half of this episode, so it's a good episode. Yeah, it's a very, very good episode. Yes, this is a Chemical X episode. A very, very good episode. And I do not like Princess Morbucks, but she does get defeated, which is rare for me to admit. I like her getting defeated because it makes her show her place. And it makes her come back down to reality, basically. And yeah, that's all I have to say about this Princess Morbucks episode. Too bad I have to watch more Princess Morbucks episodes, and this is going to be frustrating to watch. Those are going to be frustrating to watch. Episode 21B, Pet Feud. The air date is February 13th of 2000, and the production code is 208. The plot of this episode is that the professor creates a pet named Bebo that increases in size whenever it eats. The girls must not feed him more than once. The fun fact of this episode is that Professor Utonium really cares about the Powerpuff Girls. The pet playing scenes are wonderful in this episode because I have a pet and she's pretty nice, except to other people. So yeah, the Powerpuff Girls forget the only rule for Bebo, which is feed him only once, and as a result, that causes him to eat too much, like it's an eating disorder or something. But Bebo goes on a rampage, eats everything, and then explodes into a smaller version of itself. And Mrs. Bellum has the right to be mad because, well, she got ate by Bebo. So yeah, and everyone gets a pet in this episode. So yeah, basically, that's the whole episode. But at least I think this is a good. Is it a good episode or a bad episode? It's sort of in the middle for me, and I'll tell you why. This is a mediocre episode for me because, well, Bebo's design is bland. Also, it's just from what I've watched of it, I watched the entire episode through and through, and it just seemed mad to me because it just seems more of a half-baked episode than a regular Chemical X episode. And Professor Utonium does care about the Powerpuff Girls too, by having um by having him build a pet for them. And the Powerpuff Girls are like actual children in this episode. It's just not the way you expect. Bubble, well, yeah. I'm just having a hard time to say anything to say about this episode because it's bland to me. And well, yeah, I think that's it. Episode 22A, Imaginary Fiend. The air date is March 17th of 2000 and the production code is 209. Part of this episode is that the girls must stop Patches, an imaginary friend of Mike, a new kid at Pokego's kindergarten. The fun fact is that Coos, Bo's imaginary friend, comes back in a later season of Dexter's Laboratory. The imaginary friends, at least in this universe, actually exist in the Powerpuff Girls universe. There's also a South Park reference in this episode. Blossom is knocked into the coats of the other students. And poor Miss King, she gets really, really tortured in this episode. Not really, really tortured, but ridiculous tortured. Like, did this imaginary friend have beef with her or something? Have actual beef? I don't think so. I think he was just doing it to be a clown. And at the end of the episode, the girls do not name their imaginary friend, which is mysterious. Patches is probably him in disguise. I don't know what I was thinking with that one, because if him would be a lot more elaborate with his plan. He would just either possess the kid or do something worse, I guess. So yeah, this is a great, very good episode, and the imaginary friend concept is done pretty well. Too bad that the kid got blamed for Patch's wrongdoings, which sucks, but somebody had to take the fall. This is a great episode because of the concept itself of an imaginary friend actually turning out to be a real pain in the ass. But I think Very Odd Parents did something very, very similar to this in their one of their earlier seasons, which is probably season 2, season 3-ish. But in that show, he was brought actually to life. So yeah, Patches is a good villain for this episode because he's a jester and he just jokes around. So yeah, this is a great episode because of those elements, and I would recommend watching this. Episode 22B, Cootie Gras. The air date is March 17th of 2000 and the production code is 209. The plot of this episode is the girls get afraid of cooties and Mojo uses that to his advantage. The fun fact is that the narrator says that love is in the air at the end of the episode while Mojo is in prison after getting beaten up, and he just says, yeah, I know what kind of joke that really is. I think everybody knows at that point. So in this episode, Mojo takes advantage of the situation of cooties, which don't fucking exist. Well, they don't really exist at all. But the Powerpuff Girls are scared of cooties, and well, Mojo takes advantage of that. And the nightmare is a horrible thing to see, with the Powerpuff Girls exploding, basically. But yeah, it's disturbing to a certain extent. I'm just gonna say that, to a certain extent. And Mojo takes over Townsville with the Mafia. I'm not kidding. With the Mafia using the kid with supposed cooties. So yeah, this episode I think is a pretty good episode because it's a PSA for cooties, and the writers say, hey, it's not real, but this is possibly what could have happened. I don't think that would possibly even happen because a normal defense of a city would just put that guy down. So yeah. So what do I think of this episode? Okay, this is a very, very, very good episode because it's basically a PSA activities, as I said beforehand. The elements just work, and it turns out that cooties are not actually real, and the Powerpuff Girls get over their fear. Well, not their sweet fears, but I'm spoiling another episode of a later season, am I? So yeah, this is why it's a Chemical X episode. Episode 23A, The Powerpuff Girls' Best Rainy Adventure Ever. The air date is April 28th of 2000 and the production code is 210. The plot of this episode is that the girls play inside due to crimes not being committed, so they have to make up an imaginary adventure to pass the time. The fun fact of this episode is that Mojo sends a monster to attack the city at the end of the episode. Bubbles does a wonderful job as Mayor Pretend, of course, and Blossom also does a wonderful job as Mrs. Bell in Pretend. The Professor Utonium has a frown on his face because he's forced to play with the Powerpuff Girls little game, and it is hilarious. But later in the episode, Blossom pretends to be Mojo and she's like there for 5 or 6 hours. And so she goes to research, goes to investigate, and Bubbles and Buttercup are playing a video game, which is weird because we don't see any video games at that point, but yeah. And at the end of the episode, yada yada, you get it. So yeah, so what do I think of this rainy adventure? Is it a very bad adventure? Or is it a good adventure? Well, this is a good episode because of the concept and its originality in the episode. And it shows us that the Powerpuff Girls are just, they're like any other kid too. They put their imagination to use and it actually works to their advantage. Well, until Blossom unplugs the cartridge from the system, the video game system, and then they have fun. And then, well, their best adventure ever ends. And they have to save the day again. And the narrator ends the episode by wanting to be playing as Bubbles. Well, that's kind of cute. Wait a minute. Kind of. So yeah, that's my thoughts. Episode 23B, Just Desserts. The air date is April 28th of 2000, and the production code is 210. The plot of this episode is that the Smiths unite to get revenge on the Powerpuff Girls after dinner was ruined. Fun fact, the Smith family have interesting costumes, except Harold Smith. So yeah, it's basically a revenge story. And this is a sequel to Supervillain, which was an episode earlier in the season. The Smith family do get interesting costumes, like I just said. The Smiths vandalize the Powerpuff Girls' home later in the episode after Harold is released, and Mary Ann wants to get revenge for ruining their dinner, apparently, which was Harold's fault in reality. And the professor is kind of sad in this episode after the Smiths vandalize the house. And then the Smiths do something that I actually expected. They drive the Smiths. They after the upgraded van is shown in the prior scene. The upgraded van, the Smiths go into the upgraded van, and then they basically start channeling their inner Mario Kart. Like seriously, they do. They drive through the Powerpuff Girls' home like it's a track in Mario Kart. I'm not kidding. That actually happens. And it is weird, but I kind of like it. But the plan of Mary Ann is not really that good and really fucking stupid when you think about it. Yeah, it's really, really stupid. Which means it's a mediocre episode. Yeah, that's right, everybody. It's a mediocre episode this time. Which means it doesn't suck. it's just mad at me, like usual. Marianne's plan for getting back at the Powerpuff Girls is overkill, in my opinion. How about not just talk to them or move away if you can? But I'm pretty sure that Marianne didn't have any money to get a second house, so getting revenge on the Powerpuff Girls was their second option. So yeah, it's just really, it's a mediocre episode, and you fight the Superpower Girls with weapons, with actual missiles coming from the van. Like, what the hell? But then again, they're a middle class family, so it's a mediocre episode for me. Yeah, it's not. The sequel is not really that good. So yeah, let's move on to the next episode. Episode 24A, Twisted Sister. The air date is May 26th of 2000 and the production code is 211. The plot of this episode is that the girls create a new Powerpuff Girl, Bunny, to help them fight crime. But this Powerpuff Girl does the opposite of crime fighting by releasing criminals from jail. Fun fact, the train from Major Man returns. Basically, in this episode, the Powerpuff Girls are overworked like Too Poof to Puff. So the Powerpuff Girls try to create a fourth Powerpuff Girl, but they end up getting the recipe, the perfect girl recipe wrong, and then Bunny turns out to be disabled, which is fine by me. More equality for the win, I guess. But even as Bunny cries and retreats because Blossom got angry at her, I feel bad for her, I really do. But after she finally does her intended purpose, she explodes at the end, which is sad. Pretty sad. And the Powerpuff Girls are in character the entire time. Well, most of the time anyway. And the narrators just cried at the end. I feel bad for them, I really do. I just feel bad for the Townies and, not the Townies, the Powerpuff Girls in this instance because they lost basically their daughter. Basically. So yeah. So what do I think about this episode? This is a great episode for the only appearance of Bunny. And yeah, may she rest in peace. And the replacement we got in 2016 Powerpuff Girls reboot was bland. Mostly bland. Now, I don't care if she's black or not. I don't care if she's black or not. I just care about character development. Yeah, I care about character development more than the actual color of people's skin. So yeah, this was a great episode, and may Bunny return someday in the reboot. Episode 24B, Cover Up. The air date is May 26th of 2000, and the production code is 211. The plot of this episode is that Blossom and Bubbles discover Buttercup as a blanket to help her with crime fighting, but when the blanket goes missing, her courage is gone. The fun fact for this episode is that Blossom and Bubbles tease Buttercup for having a security blanket. Yeah, this episode is not really good, so I'll explain why in the second slide of this presentation here. Not second slide of the presentation, you know what I mean. But Buttercup's security blanket is like Octi for Bubbles, basically. And if you take that away, yeah, you're gonna have a problem. Buttercup has a solo action scene that I like though, and I do feel bad for Buttercup because, well, she, you'll in the episode itself, she looks all over her security blanket and she cries on the floor and cries and cries and cries and cries and cries. I feel bad for that. And Buttercup's breakdown is nothing funny. It's not funny. It's it's heartbreaking. Okay? And Blossom and Bubbles are brats in this specific episode. I wouldn't say that they're like Princess Morbucks or worse than Princess Morbucks, because it, if they were worse than Princess Morbucks, I think I would know. So yeah, I just do not like this episode, and I'm gonna give you my final rating for it in the next slide. Okay, this episode sucks. It completely sucks. It's just, it is very, very bad. Not up there with one course meal, but it's not really that bad. Okay, it's bad. Okay, it's very, very bad, and nobody likes this episode. It's an Antidote X episode for me because of the simple torture of Buttercup. I am sorry. Nobody should be tortured like that. Yes, it's a kid show. I get it. It's a kid show. But you told me in revealing that he did an experiment boils my blood a little bit. It boils my blood. Okay, it boils my blood how stupid he really is. Professor, you told me really stupid. He still cares about him, but I swear he has this sort of bipolar disorder mentality or something. I don't know. I will explain it in later seasons how this that this was the beginning of the downfall. Sort of, not really the downfall. Professor Utone did, I think, this did his best, honestly, in this incarnation. And we're gonna move on to episode 24, episode 25A. Episode 25A, Speed Demon. The air date is June 2nd, 2000, and the production code is 212. The plot of this episode is that the girls are looking forward to going on vacation, but accidentally time travel to the future where him controls the world. Fun fact, CGI is used in this episode. So the girls can time travel like in Sonic Generations for some reason, but hey, this is a good episode. Anyway, the future's creepy, well, because everything's abandoned and Mrs. Bellum is creepy, like she has this grayish skin in the future. Yeah, and the mayor's dead, so that sucks. And him has a true form in this episode, which you can see in the picture that is provided. Well, it's a Funko Pop, really, but hey, it's something. I couldn't find any other picture of him's true form, so that's what I got. So yeah. So this is definitely a Chemical X episode with its setbacks. Even though it's a Chemical X episode, I still am afraid that it's it has problems, but not major problems. I don't know what the Townsville theory is, according to my notes here. I think it's a scientist theory where it's all pretend, which doesn't make sense because him is the actual devil or demon, actually. So, yeah, God. I think he's really a demon of Townsville or a devil, the actual fucking devil, which is terrifying to see. But hey, back then, people are a lot less tolerant than they are now. Let's just say that. And also, him took over the world pretty easily, which I understand. Maybe he took control of Townsville and hypnotized people. So yeah, and the professor's also creepy in that episode because he's old. And well, yeah, everything in this episode is creepy, but it's I that but that's the intention. I believe that's the intention of the episode. So yeah, It's a pretty good episode with its general creepiness, and we're probably going to see more episodes like this in the later seasons. Episode 25B, Mojo Jonesin. The air date is June 2nd of 2000. The production code is 212. The part of this episode is that some kids from Pokio's kindergarten are given Chemical X by Joe Overcoat, a fake identity for Mojo, but in return they have to destroy the Powerpuff Girls. Fun fact, there is a Captain Planet reference in this episode. Yeah, a Captain Planet reference in this episode. I don't think Captain Planet was really that good to begin with, was it? Oh, and also the kids are very diverse. According to this episode, Mojo's Chemical X is very limited, so I guess he has to steal the original source, which I understand. Then there's a quick addiction to Chemical X once the kids get it. And let's just say that there's some weird stuff in there that makes them that way. And the kids sacrifice their powers at the end to save the Powerpuff Girls. And this is actually a pretty good episode. It is very, very good. Everything from the beginning to the end of the episode is pretty good. And I really, really like this episode. It's a PSA for stranger danger, and it's effective. Pretty effective, I believe. And well, it is pretty darn good. So yeah, this is a very, very good episode, and we're going to move on to episode 26A. Episode 26A, Something's Amiss. The air date is June 30th of 2000 and the production code is 213. The plot of this episode is that Mrs. Bellum starts seducing the mayor into giving her days off. But at night, she comes back to the mayor's office to use the Powerpuff Girls hotline to report a crime, but there is something not adding up. Fun fact, Mayor and Mrs. Bellum do care about each other. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that's obvious from Speed Demon. They cared about each other pretty much. But Mrs. Bellum acts strange throughout the episode, and the mayor is easily seduced, which is because he's the mayor. And then there's a kind of an inappropriate joke where a pencil is shoved into a sharpener. I think I know what it is, but I'm not going to tell you guys. The girls put the puzzle together, which means Blossom put the puzzle together because it was pretty easy to figure out that it was Sedusa, which makes sense. Really makes sense. And there's a major plot twist, which is Sedusa was pretending to be Mrs. Bellum all along, which is very great. But then you have the boss fight versus, well, it's more like a Mortal Kombat fight. It's Sedusa versus Bellum, and Bellum obviously wins by cutting Sedusa's hair off, which was pretty smart because I think even Mrs. Bellum was getting sick of Sedusa at this point. And we don't see the Sedusa for a couple seasons after this. So yeah, this is a great episode. This is a great episode. This is a great episode because well, it shows what Sedusa can really do in this episode besides seducing people. She can take over people's lives apparently, and it's just awesome. Yeah, and I like the cat fight between Bellum and Mrs. Bellum. Sorry. I like the cat fight between Mrs. Bellum and Sedusa too. It was a very great to watch. And I loved it from the beginning to the end, where Sedusa finally got her just desserts. Yeah, this is a great episode, and I love it. Episode 26B, Slumbering with the Enemy. The air date is June 30th of 2000 and the production code is 213. The plot of this episode is the Powerpuff Girls for a slumber party and invite every girl in their school. Unfortunately, Mojo gets the final invitation to disguise himself as a girl to get Antidote X. Fun fact, at the end of the episode it is shown that simple girls could beat Mojo. Before we move on, come on, man, you got beaten by children. How embarrassing is that? Really, that is embarrassing. But that is really embarrassing. Superpowers, I could let that slide. Okay, this is a typical slumber party episode with the girls inviting their friends over, yada yada yada. And the professor can't see past Mojo's disguise because I guess, yeah, he had no excuse for that. And why does Mojo need Antidote X? I'm pretty sure it's because he has a limited quantity of it, so he needs to get the actual stuff so that he can, you know, defeat them for real, I guess. Which I think is way better than trying to destroy him. Destroying him, it'll only bring you misery. It'll only bring you misery. And the Powerpuff Girls should have told their guests, but I guess it was for a simple reason. Very, very obvious reason that I do not get in this episode. So, what do I think of this episode? Okay, this is a mediocre episode because one, the professor can't see past that obvious disguise that Mojo had. Number two, the Powerpuff Girls should have told their guests about Mojo being there, but I guess the girls didn't want to creep out their friends. And a different ending would have happened, which would have been hilarious to see, in my opinion. Very, very hilarious to see when I'm thinking about it. And Mojo's plan did work to an extent, but I guess he didn't foresee him being beaten by simple girls. Oh my god. That is pathetic. Very pathetic, my friend. Very pathetic. Oh, this is gonna be enjoyable. And I'm never gonna let him, and I'm never gonna let Mojo live this one down. Ah. Oh, anyway, that's the end of the episode, so let's get on to the post episode reviewing stuff. Okay, this is my personal worst and best season 2 Powerpuff Girls episodes list. So let's move on to the worst Powerpuff Girls episodes of the season. Cover Up is a pretty bad one with the girls be with Blossom and Bubbles giving Buttercup a hard time. Number 2 is a very special Blossom where Blossom steals something which heroes aren't supposed to do anyway. And number 1 is Stuck Up in a Way where Morbucks made her first appearance and she was intolerable the entire episode. My god, Princess Morbucks is intolerable. So the best Powerpuff Girl episodes for the season are number 3, Collector, number 2, Beat Your Greens, and number 1, Twisted Sister. So yeah, these were the best in order of greatness. So yeah, so that's my personal worst and best season 2 Powerpuff Girls episodes list. And now let's move on to the chart. As you can see on the season 2 pie chart, we have a minority of Antidote X episodes, which are free, and a majority of Chemical X episodes, which are 16. But in the middle, we have 7 mediocre episodes, which means that Chemical X is a great, which means that season 2 is a great Chemical X season. So this season was pretty good, with a few minor bugs and a few rotten episodes that I will never watch ever again in my lifetime, unless I want to make reviews on those certain episodes. So yeah. So this has been every episode of 1998 Powerpuff Girls Season 2 reviewed. So I'll see you guys next time when we do that Teletubbies creepypasta dealing with passings and with the secrets of the professor at the end of the month. So I'll see you guys next time.